Today on this episode, we'll be talking about SPDs. SPDs, that is surge protective devices. And most of the fire outbreak you are seeing in your breaker boxes, in your inverter room, most of them are being caused by SPDs. So on today's episode, we are going to discuss how this can happen. Now, if you take an SPD and look at the SPD, you see a volt rating. Some are rated 500 volts, while some are rated 1000 volts, and so on. As we all know from the previous section, that when there's lightning, when there's thunder, there are thousands of volts that is being released, and this volt begins to travel till it meets a particular contact or an object of high resistive path. Now, when there's lightning, these thousands of voltage, let's assume they drop on your solar panels and travel through your conductor. The SPD will automatically discover that there is a surge voltage that is above the rated voltage of the SPD. So the SPD will immediately activate, and in activating, the SPD is going to create an ohmic contact between the lifeline, the neutral line, to ground, so that all the SSs can flow to ground. Now, if this occur because of the heavy amount of current that is present, the breaker attached to the SPD is supposed to automatically go off. But when the breaker refuses to go off, the SPD can explode. The SPD can catch fire, because that moment the SPD is connecting excess current to ground. So the breaker is supposed to sense the presence of that excess current, and the breaker is supposed to trip off. That's why when rating your breaker, you have to be very, very sensitive as an engineer. Not that you just see they say the breaker is 100 amps and you go and buy 100 amps for a system that need 37 amps, or sorry, 32 amps or 63 amps. You went and install breaker of 100 amps or even 150 amps, that breaker will not go off. So if there is surge from the PV or even from the AC part, and your surge device activates. Activation means connecting the lifelines, that is the neutral and the lines, to earth. And this is going to create heavy heat generation, and this heat can lead to fire outbreak. Now, sometimes if you look at your SPD, you see them burning gradually. You'll be like, what's happening? I install an SPD, and before you know, you see the SPD burning gradually. What happens is that if there is excess voltage, and mostly when the SPD is fake, when the SPD is not doing what is written on the SPD, the SPD that is rated 500 volts is now allowing 300 volt to earth parts, which is not supposed to be so. If the SPD begin to allow 300 volt gradually to the earth parts, what is going to happen? There will be heat generation, because there's conversion of energy to ground. So there will be heat generation. So that continuous heating will begin to burn the SPD gradually, and it can lead to fire outbreak as well. So SPDs are very, very important in our installation. But in doing so, you have to attach a sensitive breaker that is going to go off if the SPD activates, if the SPD closes the live neutral to earth. And as we all know, we have three-phase SPDs. We call it have single-phase SPDs. We still have SPD that we use for our solar, that is the DC SPDs. We call it have the AC SPDs. So three-phase SPD, when they activate, they do the same thing. They link all the phases and neutral to ground. So SPD work perfectly if there's earth, there is sufficient earthing connected to the earth terminal. That's one. And two, a perfect breaker have to be before the SPD, so that if the SPD activates, this breaker can go off, sensing excess current.